Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dogman Sasquatch Oklahoma Encounters. My name is Lance Hightower, one of the Cryptid brothers, and I'll be hosting this evening. The other two brothers are out, so you'll have just me tonight. Before we get started, we'd really like to thank some of our latest audience that we have in Australia and the UK. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate the comments and your viewership. And also, we'd like to give a shout out to some of the people commenting. We want to do this every episode, so to Baby B in Kuwait, thank you so much for following. And Michelle Healy, Tony Wilkins, 10foot5x, ROA, and some of the others out there. We're going to try to recognize you guys each and every episode because we appreciate you guys a lot. And without you, we would not have a show. So we understand that and recognize that, and we can't thank you enough. So this evening's episode is really kind of a strange one. It was really bizarre, but I think you'll find it as interesting as I did. Not this past weekend, but the weekend before. So I'm out and about, and I get a call on my phone of a gentleman who said he was local and that he was a healthcare professional. He had never called in to any show before and really didn't know kind of what to do. He was a little nervous, you could tell. And I said, well, just tell your story. I don't need to know who you are or, where you work or anything. I just want to hear what you have to say. He said, well, he lives outside of Tulsa in a community, and he travels a highway back and forth to Tulsa frequently because of a large healthcare facility he works at. And that after this encounter or this thing that he saw, he went home and was frantic and trying to find out just what it is that he saw. And he began to research and got online, and he was looking under wolf and big wolves and big dogs and everything. And he said, I came across your channel. I saw that you guys were local Oklahoma boys, and so I just thought I would share with you. And I said, yeah, no problem, sure. And so he said that this, getting into the story, we chatted for a moment, then he got into the story and said this occurred last November 2nd of 2016 while driving late from work about 11:30 on a major highway just outside of Tulsa. In fact, the highway, I will tell you, is called the Creek Turnpike. And he said he travels it frequently, going home and going to work. And I said, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I drive it, occasionally. I live just in Tulsa County, and I said, but yeah, I've been on it many, many times. And so we chatted a little bit, and he said, yeah, I also drive a 4x4. I'm an outdoorsman, and I'm an avid hunter, and so my wife and I, we like to travel to the backwoods, not only in Oklahoma, but out of state quite a bit, and camp and do some other things. And so this 4x4 just allows us to kind of get around. I said, yeah, I get it. And he said he's got a lot of these Baja type of lights on his 4x4, and that he's got some pretty good sized tires and a lift kit. And it's something that fits his personality, and he drives all the time. And so he talked about this because this actually does have a correlation into the encounter later as he told the story. He explained that that November 2nd, there was a storm that had come through Tulsa, and that, and I'll back up just a little bit here. He said that where this encounter, he was describing where it occurred on the Creek Turnpike. He told me, and then as I said, I think I know exactly where that's at now, more specifically. And I said, that's only just a few miles from where I live. And then he kind of chuckled, and he said, well, congratulations. I'm glad it's you and not me based on what I saw. So we had kind of a fun moment for just a second there, but it really wasn't all that funny when he described exactly what he saw to me. He said that night it had rained, and that there was some water on the highways. And so, like I said, like he was telling me, it was about 11:30. And he said typically at that time of night, there's very, very little traffic on the highway. And I said, yeah, I've driven on it late. There's very little. And there's actually no type of highway lighting out there since it's in the outer perimeter of Tulsa. And he said that he was slowing down because of the water on the highway. He didn't want to hydroplane some of his large tires on his 4x4, so he kept it to around 60 miles an hour. And he said that as he was driving from the healthcare facility where he works, driving home on this Creek Turnpike, he was coming around a corner, and his lights caught something up ahead, kind of not in his lane, but off to the side, on the same side he was. He was driving in the right-hand lane. And I asked him, he said that it wasn't in the road, but it was in the grass area, just off the shoulder of the road. It was still kind of a relatively flat area. He caught something, and he didn't know what it was initially. He didn't know if it was a deer getting ready to bolt across or something. And so, since there was no traffic coming against him, no traffic around, he flipped on these Baja lights. And he said that these lights are really, really powerful. They can reach up to about a half a mile, and they're extremely strong. And he said typically anything, when he flips the lights on, any animals that are in front of him will just bolt and run. Nothing doesn't want to get in the way. And, most animals in general, especially coyotes and bobcat or whatever, if you're approaching, a vehicle's approaching, they'll run. But as he was coming around the corner, he noticed that when he flipped the lights on, that he said, of course, as bright as these lights are, they can really make out any details. He said, because they're really, really bright. They'll reach up to a half a mile. And I said, yeah, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. And he said, but what was up ahead did not run. And he said, I could tell that it was a deer was laying down. It was kind of like maybe a deer was crossways to me, so he could see the length of the deer up ahead. But what alarmed him and shook him up was what was hunched over the deer, and it was actually facing him, he said. He said it didn't move. It was really big. And as he approached, he saw this thing. He said, I went from 60 and I slowed down to about 30 miles an hour. I didn't want to stop. I stayed in my lane, so I slowed down to about 30. And as he was coming closer and closer to this corner or this curve, he said, I could definitely see that there was a deer that was crossways. It was down. It appeared dead, obviously. But as I got closer, and whatever it was did not bolt off, this thing was hunched over the deer. It was bent over the deer facing me. And then it started getting terrifying. I looked, and he said, this thing, I could see that there was a head. And he said this head was shaped like a dog, but it was massive. It was about half the width of the deer's length. And I said, well, that sounds like it's about 2.5 feet wide. He goes, yeah, exactly. It would have easily gone that. And he reiterated that this thing did not bolt off. It just stayed bent over looking at him. And he said what the crazy thing was that really shook him up was the width of the shoulders. And I said, oh, you saw some shoulders? He said, oh, yeah. He said, one of the features that shook me up about this thing, not only just seeing it, he said, but this thing had man shoulders. And I said, man shoulders? He said, yes, man shoulders. Not like dog shoulders. He goes, like man shoulders, you can see the outer deltoid curvature of the shoulder like a man. He said it was like a bodybuilder, but it was like 3 times bigger than any bodybuilder. It was huge. And I said, how wide was it? And he goes, it was about the width of the deer's body. And I said, so you're saying maybe 4.5 feet? He goes, oh, yeah, it was definitely that. He goes, it was massive. And he said, I could definitely tell that these shoulders were so huge and bold right there. And this animal, again, was kind of bent down. He said, as I got closer to it, he said that, again, this thing did not move. He was noticing the shoulders. There was hair all over it. He said, as he got closer, I asked him, I said, well, how big was this thing? He says, well, like I said, the shoulders were 4.5 feet. The head was about 2.5 feet in width. And I said, so, he goes, I told you I drive a 4x4. And I said, yes. He goes, well, the bumpers, the fenders of my 4x4 are pretty high off the ground. They're about 4 feet. He goes, this thing as I got really close to it, and again, it stayed off to the shoulder, just off in the grass area, he said that it was even bent over. It was about 4 feet. And I said, really? I said, did it ever stand up? He said, no. If it would have stood up, I would have completely lost it and had a heart attack. And he said, yeah. He said, this thing was massive. And I said, so in your opinion, do you think it would have gone, I don't know, 7 feet? And he said, without hesitation, oh yeah, at least 7 to 8 feet. Actually pretty easy. This thing, you could tell it was big. And I said, now I know this is hard to tell. Do you think that the weight of this thing, what in your best guesstimation? Because it sounded like he was an avid hunter. I mean, he knows the outdoors. He hunts coyotes. He just said he got through hunting coyotes. He's hunted cats, bobcats, mountain lions, white-tailed deer. He's an avid hunter, and he knows his stuff. In the conversation we were having, and he said, yeah, this thing probably would have gone 300-400 pounds, maybe even more. He goes, it was huge. And he said, when I was asking about other details, he said, well, the color of this thing was about kind of a reddish brown gray mixture. And he said, kind of like a coyote. And I said, well, he said, it would have blended in so well to the Oklahoma landscape, because in our Oklahoma landscape this time of the year, which is kind of a winter, everything is kind of grays, reds, browns, yellows. And he said, yeah, it would have blended in so well. If it would have been in the grasses, there's no way you'd have probably saw it. And I said, what was the eye color? And he said, it was kind of an amber color, but it was kind of like a coyote. And I said, well, do you think it was kind of a coyote? And he goes, no. I know coyotes. I've been hunting coyotes for years and years. And he said, this was nothing like a coyote. This made a coyote look like a kitty cat. He goes, coyotes will usually bolt off, run off. They don't want anything to do with you, especially if they catch wind that you're trying to hunt them or they scent you. He said, this thing did not move. It knew I was a car and I had lights flipped on it, and it didn't move. And as I got closer, it didn't hesitate. It didn't act scared. And he said, I didn't know what I was looking at first. And then he said something that really, he said, aside from seeing this thing, aside from the shoulders really shaking him up of how massive this thing was, he said, this thing gave, as I got closer, he said, this thing gave a grin. And I said, a grin? He said, well, let me say this. He goes, you know, there's certain breeds of dogs that when they're happy, they'll just kind of, they have a light grin or a smile. You can tell they're a happy dog. I said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And he said, well, this was a grin, but it was sinister. You could tell that it was a grin that said something to me. I said, really? I said, what do you think it was saying, that grin? He says, well, obviously it didn't talk, but the grin more or less said, yeah, this is my dinner, and if you think you're bad enough to get out, and you can be dinner too. So just go on about your way and leave me alone. And then that happened as he got closer to this thing. I asked him if he saw any teeth on this thing. He said not really. Its mouth, its muzzle was closed, but he could definitely, without a doubt, see there was a grin there. And that's when he just kind of lost. He had to take off. He said, you know, on a 4x4, they're typically not fast. They're not like a sports car. So it takes a while once you've slowed down to get up to speed. I said, yeah, I've got 4x4s. And he said, yeah, I was just praying this thing was not going to chase me, because it took a while from 30 miles an hour to try to build back up highway speeds. I said, yeah, exactly. He said, yeah, I was just praying this thing would not try to catch me, because the size of this thing looked like it was super, super fast. And I said, did at any time from when you first saw it to when you went right by it super close, did it stand up? He said, no, it stayed bent over the whole time, but had it stood up, he goes, I would have lost it. I would have surely had a heart attack. I'm so glad it didn't stand up. And so he sped off as fast as he could, and that's when he went on to his house and he tried to do some investigation on this, what was going on, what this thing was. And so he was as baffled as anyone. He said, I've never seen anything like this out of all the years of hunting, and this definitely, absolutely was not a coyote. It was not any kind of animal like from a zoo, anything. Even though the color schemes on this thing was kind of like a coyote, it was not a coyote. This thing was massive. So he said that, or I asked him, we talked a little bit more on this, and I asked him, I said, well, tell me some more details. He said, well, it had like a dog muzzle. It definitely had a dog muzzle, and the ears were pointed upward, it kind of straight up. And I asked him, I said, well, I know you've never seen anything like this, but is there anything remotely close that you can compare, being an avid outdoorsman and hunter, that you can compare this thing to? And he goes, not really. I really can't. I've never harvested anything like this. I've never shot at anything like this. He said, you know, the only thing that I can really compare this thing to is something I've never hunted before and nothing I've seen. He said, but he goes, and he hesitated for a second, and he took a kind of a deep breath. He said, it was a werewolf. It was a werewolf is what I saw. That's exactly what I saw. It was like some of those werewolf movies that you see. He said, I asked him previous knowledge on Sasquatch or Bigfoot in Oklahoma or what he knows. He said, well, he goes, I'm not going to say I don't believe in Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I've never personally seen one or had an encounter, or I don't have any close friends that's had one, but I'm not without saying that a being or a cryptid like this doesn't exist, but I never heard of anything what I saw. And I said, well, and he asked me, he said, what do you think I saw? Are these things prevalent in Oklahoma? And I said, well, no one really knows a lot about these. Unfortunately, there's been people having encounters for years, and it seems like more so, whether it be social media, it's allowing people to kind of share these unfortunate encounters. They're usually never pleasant when it comes to a dogman-like creature. And there's different varieties that people have seen, and there's different types. And so the one that he saw was more of the type that looked like a werewolf rather than a squatch dog type of creature combination. And so we chatted some more about that. And then we both shared, and we just said, look, I said, you know, no one really knows how these came into existence. There is a researcher, a geneticist, Dr. Melba Ketchum, who's got some interesting data to report on that. I said, but as far as something in the meantime to possibly hang your hat on that might be explainable, I said, in the Old Testament, the Nephilim, in the book of Genesis of the Bible, they talk about creatures like this existing, the sons of man and the daughters of man and the sons of gods. And then we got into that. We started chatting about that. And that I said, possibly they've been here for a very long time. Maybe even an ancient being and creature that's been dormant here for years and years possibly. And so we chatted some more about that. And he says, well, how did these things survive? I mean, he says, I could tell by just the sight of this thing, it looked like a carnivore. I mean, it's a meat eater. And I said, you're right. If it eats any type of plant sources, I know that certain game animals, predators, will eat persimmons, Oklahoma persimmons, and sometimes berries when they're in the bloom and out and about through the year. And but this thing looked like it was primarily an apex predator, a meat eater. And I said, well, you know, what do we have most likely of here in Oklahoma and across the United States is deer and hogs and deer. I said, so I'm going to say that is probably most likely one of the most readily available protein sources, not only in our state, but everywhere. And he agreed too. And I said, but unfortunately, if man gets too close, we could be an unfortunate food source if we're not careful. And he quickly agreed on that too. I said, so these things could literally roam anywhere they want. They've been sighted through the day more boldly than, say, Sasquatch or Bigfoots. And so and they know, I believe, that they are really high there as far as an apex predator, as massive as they are. I think they know their size compared to man. And I asked him a question. I said, now, you've kind of already alluded to this, but I'm still going to ask it. I said, when you approached this, and this had this sinister grin, do you think it had the ability to reason or think? And without hesitation, he said, absolutely, absolutely, no doubt. This thing knew what it was thinking. It knew what message it wanted to convey to me when it grinned the way it did. He goes, I have no doubt. It didn't move. It didn't appear frightened. It wasn't squeamish. It was so big, it just stood over the deer. He goes, now, I don't know if it killed that deer. I said, did it have blood on it? Now, he didn't say it did, but, excuse me, he said that maybe this deer may have been roadkill. A car hit it, and it smelt it and came up on it, or maybe it killed it itself. He said, I really don't know. It all happened so fast. He goes, I did not stop. And I asked him if he shared this with any of his friends or family. He said, yeah, I've shared it with my family, my immediate family, and I've shared it just with a couple buddies. And he said, I won't share it at work. I work in a healthcare environment, and they would think I'm, I would get ridicule and being the profession I'm in. I said, well, I understand. I totally get it. I understand. He said, yeah, I've just shared it with a few buddies. And I said, so to those people you've shared this story with, what do they think? And he said, oh, they believe me. Why would I make up something like this? And he goes, I wouldn't. He said, I'm a pretty matter-of-fact kind of guy. I'm an avid hunter. My buddies are avid hunters. We know the woods. And I said, well, has this sighting changed your outlook on how you prepare or how you view the outdoors now? He said, absolutely. He said, first off, my wife and some of my family go into Tulsa and they take this route. And I said, if you ever break down out there on that particular stretch of road, do not, and I repeat, do not stop. He's told his family, do not stop. If you have a flat tire or whatever, you drive on the flat tire. I don't care if it ruins the tire and the rims. Drive somewhere other than that place, and we'll just buy new tires and rims. But do not stop out there. So this shook this guy up. I could tell in his voice he was truthful. He was sincere. He was definitely telling me something that shook him up and giving me features that you just can't really, it's hard to make details up like this. And I said, well, how do your buddies view your story? And he said, oh, they believe me. And I said, so what have you and what have they done? Because I'm sure, are you going to go back out and hunt in the woods? He says, oh, yeah, we'll continue. He said, but we've changed ammo loads, definitely, with some of the firearms that we use quite often for different game and harvesting different big game and predator. He goes, I change ammo loads, and I take, probably a few more firearms that's some heavy loads, but yeah, we've changed that, and they believe me, no doubt. And I asked him, I said, do you know anyone else that has seen anything like this that you're close to, a friend? He goes, no one else. And I asked him, I said, do you find yourself lucky, unlucky that you saw this? You were the only one there? And he goes, well, I don't know if the next car down the road, there was no one behind me or in front of me. I don't know if anyone else saw this. I hesitated even calling you. I've never done anything like this. Again, I found you guys' channel on YouTube, and I thought, I saw that you do just Oklahoma and some of the surrounding states, so I thought I'd just call you. He said, but, I don't know. No one that I'm aware of has even mentioned anything remotely close to anything like what I saw. And so we talked some more, and I appreciated him sharing with us. He didn't want to give his name, and again, I respected that. He didn't want to give where he lives or what part of the healthcare profession he's in, and I said I didn't need to know those things. I respect his confidentiality, and that should he ever bump into one of these things or see something like this on any level, to keep in contact. And he said, oh, he would, but he hopes he never has to call me regarding that he saw something like that. He never wants to bump into anything like this again. And I thanked him for having the courage to share his story, and we had a little bit of small talk, and then we hung up, and I got his number. if I have to follow up for anything, if anyone else in the Tulsa area sees this. And I asked him what was one of the deciding factors in sharing the story. He said, well, it just feels better to share it. I think now that I told you, I didn't realize that. But the other thing is just to let people know these things exist. He said, now, I don't have an idea how to stop them or how dangerous they are. I just saw what I saw, but I thought I would just let people know it exists, and it exists just outside of Tulsa. He said, so I had a feeling, who do you go to when you see something like this? You really can't report it to, law enforcement. What are they going to do? I mean, there really wasn't a crime or anything that happened. It did not hurt me. It was terrifying to see just the enormity of this thing and what it looked like. But, who do you go to? So that's why I'm telling you to just let you know it exists. I saw it just outside of Tulsa. And so there you go. And so, again, we kind of had some small talk. We bantered around and then hung the phone up. And so, I thought about it some. This is a stretch of the creek that I've been many, many times. That's not a part of the highway that I have to drive to work or anything like that. So I go more the in-town route rather than around the perimeter of Tulsa. So the next day, I just couldn't stand it. I had to go out and take a look at this area just to see. You're driving on highway systems, and you never pay attention to the details of little things on every stretch of the highway. So I just wanted to go out there and do some investigation just a little bit, take some pics. Lane was with me during this time. And so we're going to include some photos during this time here where we went out. And as you see the photos, there's nothing that on the appearance of these photos that look unusual. It looks like any other stretch of highway, of interstate that you'd see practically anywhere in the Midwest. The ravines are nice and manicured. We have Bermuda that's dormant this time of the year for the winter. The grass is only about 2 inches, 3 inches tall right now, and there's nice smooth ravines. And you'll see a picture of coming up to the corner, us being on the corner right there, and kind of a flattened area, and then the ravine slopes down gently quite a bit. It'll drop to about 15 feet, then it gets level again. And then you notice that there is a 4-strand or 5-strand barbed wire fence right there, and then you have woods right next to that highway. Now, I can't see how many acres of the woods. I have no idea who owns that patch of woods, but you can see through the trees on one of the pictures, about less than a quarter mile away, there is it looks like an oversized pond or retention pond. It's not that far, but otherwise, there is quite a bit of woods in there, and there's cedar, there's hardwoods, there's elm, there's oak, there's cypress, and a lot of natural grasses, blue stem and everything. So, and it all blends into the same colors that the gentleman said that this thing had, the reds, the browns, the grays. He said, yeah, it blended right in, I'm sure. Now, this was at night, of course, when he had his encounter, and it was right after a stormy night. But so we went out there. I tried to poke around to see just by happenstance if there was any carcasses of any deer on the highway side or just over the fence into that undisturbed timber side in the grasses. Lane and I looked around. We probably went up and down that fence line a couple times, probably about a 200-yard length. And so you're going to see some of the photos that we took while we were out there over the weekend. And again, there was nothing very special about that area. It's just a nice curved part of the turnpike, and there's no huge mountains, there's no heavy rocky areas, and it would be like any other area that you would see, again, going up down the Midwest. So that's what's really kind of a bizarre encounter that this gentleman had. It was so interesting, I had to just put it on. Again, I'm telling the story again because this gentleman said that he did not want to go on. He didn't want to give his name. And of course, in the very, very beginning of our conversation, I asked him if I could tell the story. He said, oh, yes, please, tell the story. I don't care. He goes, that's why I'm telling you to tell the story so people will know. So I thought you'd want to know. It was very interesting to me when I told Bill and Lane. They were just like, what? Yeah, you got to tell this story. And of course, Lane, he happened to be in town, and he said, yeah, I got to go with you out there. We got to check this out. So I thought you would enjoy it too. So be careful out there. If you guys go out there, just remember, these things do exist. Not a little bit. They exist a lot out there, 100%, 1,000% they do. We just, they're free to roam. I know there's more than one out there, but when you encounter one, I asked this guy if he saw any more than that, and he says, well, I'm so glad I didn't, but, I don't know. It was dark, and my lights didn't pick up any other eye shine or anything. I said, okay. He said, oh, yeah, had there been more than one, I'd have really freaked out as well. So, but, in other stories of other shows too, usually when you encounter one, there might be another close by, so please be careful out there. I don't recommend that you go out intentionally looking or trying to hunt these things. There's reports of people that are missing here and there through David Pilates, and I think there is some connection to these. We don't really know how or what, but I believe there is, and we're just in the process of trying to understand them. Everybody is. So in the meantime, be careful out there. I hope you guys are doing well, and we're going to close this episode off here. So again, if you or anyone you know has experienced anything unusual that you could not explain that walks on 2 or 4 legs, you've had an unexplainable eyewitness encounter that frightened you, we would really like to hear from you. We have a new toll-free number, 1-866-306-8085. That's 1-866-306-8085. If you would just give us a contact name and a number, I promise we'll keep your name confidential. We just need to know who you are, so when we call you, we can ask for you by name. You can remain anonymous, though, and we will respect your wish. You don't have to be on our show. We will respect your anonymity. But again, we would like to hear your story and document it to better inform you, our listeners, as to what happened and how it happened. So thanks again, folks, for listening. We hope you enjoyed this educational, true life encounter that happened just outside of Tulsa. And so take care, have a great evening, and thank you for listening to Dogman Sasquatch Oklahoma Encounters. We are Cryptid Brothers Investigation of Oklahoma. Take care.